On January 31st, 2018, my son Ethan, who had just turned 15, was scheduled to get his braces off. And after he got his braces off, he wanted to go celebrate. And so we went to our favorite coffee shop. And as Ethan munched on his favorite breakfast, bagels and lox, he told me about his hopes and dreams. And I remember thinking that day, looking at him, about what a difference he was going to make in this world. Well, we got home from this amazing breakfast where I think it was probably one of the best conversations I had with my son. And about an hour later, he had left to visit with his best friend from kindergarten. I saw two police officers pulling up in front of my house, and my heart sank. My husband and I were stopped by a social worker, and we were led into this tiny room where I always tell people no son ever reaches and no good news is ever delivered. And the ER doctor came into the room, and he slid down the wall, and he just buried his head in his hands, and he just whispered that your son is gone. And truly, when I tell people at that moment that my DNA changed in my body, it did.
My son, Christian Patillo, was just absolutely amazing kid. He had a smile that literally lit up a room when he came in. And when he would laugh, it was like one of those laughs that comes from the bottom of your belly and comes up, and it just brought joy. He was smart, he was personable, he played golf and baseball and just enjoyed life. So September 5th, 2021, Christian spent the night at a friend's house. Just like any other night he spent at a friend's house, or our older kids had spent nights at friends' houses. It's a sleepover. You think your kid is going to be safe. And that night, the boy whose home it was brought out one of the family guns, and it went off that night, and Christian was killed. Everybody can think it's not going to happen to them until it does. Christian was an everyday 15-year-old boy who was curious about so many different things in life. And in a moment, his life was taken and it never should have been.
Jonah was my first child. He was always very busy. He had a great big smile. He loved to debate things. He was late to talk, but as he did talk, he did not really stop. I was kind of getting on his case about being out of class a lot. He would like leave class, and so I was talking to him, and I was kind of like joking around about why he might leave class, but he got upset with me. He came back down a few minutes later and said, like, hey, okay, it's time to go to bed. Like, it's getting late and you're having trouble getting up in the morning. And he didn't want to. So he went back in the kitchen and I grabbed his phone because I didn't want him to stay on his phone and stay up late. And I took his phone up to my bedroom and got ready for bed. And he came to the bedroom door um, and said, give me my phone. And he was holding a knife. I had my hands like this, and he also had his hands kind of like this, and the knife in his hand. And I pushed against him to push him out to close the door. And the knife went into my arm, and it was not a kitchen knife, it was a hunting knife. And so it caught me pretty deeply, unintentionally. He was pretty shocked. My mother-in-law at the time, who was also stayed in the house, they dropped me off at the ER. So I called my husband and he was home. And I said, how are you? And he said, I'm okay. And I said, how's Jonah? And he said, not okay. He found that firearm. He found ammunition in either a separate drawer. I don't even know where he found the ammunition, but it wasn't locked up. Um, and he took off his glasses, put them on the stairs, and laid down in the hallway and shot himself in the right temple. Um, and that beautiful brain was just wasted all over the carpet.
And we share our stories so people understand the risks associated with even with a sleepover, especially with as prominent as guns are now in our culture, and to ask those questions when their child is going to spend the night. Ask if that home has guns. If they do have guns, ask if they're properly secured. And if you get any pushback from the family, that's probably not a place you want your child to spend the night.
That's what you need to do. You need to just unapologetically ask, if your kid's got a peanut allergy, is there peanut butter in the house? If your, child's going over, are the guns in the house? How are they stored? And if the person is offended that you ask that, then your child doesn't need to go over that home.
I know people who have had these conversations with family members, and the family members are like, well, I'm not going to lock that up. And it's like, okay, well, then my kids aren't safe at your house any more than if you said, yep, I'm going to let the kids take the four-wheeler out. I refuse to let them wear helmets. Okay, well, they're not going to go out in the four-wheeler. Okay. It shouldn't be a different situation than any other safety.
These tragedies are preventable. My son Christian did not have to die that night. He died because gun owners were negligent with how they stored their guns in the home, and their teenage son gained access to it, and my son died as a result. Being that we're not gun owners, our assumption, and we know what happens when you assume, but our assumption was that gun owners properly secured their guns in the home. And unfortunately, we learned the hardest way you can, but unfortunately, that's not always the case.
That argument that you cannot access your gun quickly is absolute myth. You can buy a gun safe off of Amazon for probably 80, $90. And that can make the difference between a child losing their life. To me, that is priceless. It just drives me crazy when people say, oh, Ethan was killed in an accident. No, he wasn't. Because the word accident presumes that there was nothing that gun owner could have done to save my child's life. And we know he could have simply locked up his guns to save my child's life.
Such a non-brainer, as I always say. Like, it's such low-hanging fruit. I can't believe it's not a national law. I grew up in England. Bruce Mateo, his wife Claire's from England. I have another friend, Diana, who's also English, and her son Francesco in the United States took his life with a firearm that his other parent allowed him to store on his bed, despite knowing he was suicidal. The irony is that all three of us mothers, had we stayed in England, would not have lost our sons because they would not have had access to firearms. The end. They just wouldn't. So that's the legacy of America. Yeah. It's not paved in gold, it's paved in bullets and children's lives.
We live in a society now where there are more guns than people, and that number continues to go up. And given that, the odds of your child going to a home where there are multiple guns, the odds of that happening are significant. So ask questions. Don't assume that they don't have guns or that they store them properly. Um, Go in and ask the questions because, like I said, it's one of the greatest regrets that I have. I didn't ask the question because I assumed any gun owner would properly secure them, and I was wrong.
Turn up, talk about it. Um, Insist that school boards send home information about safe storage when they're sending home social work packets and community information. And it's not a political issue, it's a safety issue.
When I started out on this journey, my husband, I told my husband if I can save one child, then I will at least feel like my child didn't die in vain. I do believe that we will have a cultural shift in this country at some point.
I do this for Christian. He he lost his voice. He should still be here. And I don't want any other children to lose their voice. And I don't want any other parents to have to carry this burden with them. Because that ultimately that's the true price of all of this. And I think if people understand that, they they will they will step up and do the right thing.